the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
Welcome to the Brock v. Mac Legendary Rivals podcast, and here we have one of the players who, did more than a one and done at Brock, outfielder Mike Caruso. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. Actually, infielder.
Okay,
Second,
there you go. I'm starting this one off by stepping right in the landmine, just like I did with poor
Colin.
Well, Colin a little bit, Ryan Thompson, It's, my grasp of details is getting a little shady after 30 years, although I seem to remember obscure things as opposed to important things. So,
it's all good.
And I think, of course, granted, we weren't teammates, so this is a bit of a learning experience for the two of us.
No, yeah, it is. It is. No, I was a second baseman. Came in. That's pretty much the only spot I played. Maybe shuttled in at third base once in a while, but second base was my mainstay.
Well, I'm looking forward to it because I've heard tons of good things from people I did play with about your character and what you brought to the team. So we'll be able to dive into that big blue Brock experience here shortly. Mm-hmm. But before we do, I'm gonna have my listening ears on here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up and developing a love for the sport of baseball? Were you a guy that played multiple things? A lot of folks were bouncing around with their brothers and stuff. Why don't you give us a bit of a background there and where you grew up?
So I grew up born and raised in Sault Ste. Marie in Northern Ontario, smack dab in the middle of Lake Superior, Lake Huron, and Lake Michigan. So I grew up the fourth of four boys. So I had three older brothers that all played hockey and baseball. Hockey would have been the first love and the first sport, and I just followed in those footsteps, wanting to replicate everything that they did. I was a tag along in everything that they did. So like I said, I come from my dad had no interest or exposure to sports. He's a first generation immigrant, as is my mom. So they did the best that they could and did a great job at it, giving us opportunities and allowing us to be involved in hockey first and foremost, and then baseball in the summer. No soccer for us, no hunting, fishing, nothing like that. We played hockey in the winter. We played baseball in the summer.
So being the youngest of four, did they toughen you up?
Yeah, whether I liked it or not. I like I said, I was a tag along, probably a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's one of those things where with whatever they were doing, I wanted to do in both sports, specifically in baseball. As soon as I could, I'm playing with their mitts and I'm playing with their stuff, and I'm always at the ball field, and I looked up to those guys, my brother Lou, Joe, and Steve. So I was always between the three of them. I was always at the park or at the hockey rink. So I was in that environment, that culture. I was brought up in that, and they were great athletes, and I just wanted to follow suit.
So Mike, maybe I think it's really, educational for a lot of us to understand what, you've spent some time obviously in Southern Ontario, but were there anything that was different about the way you feel that growing up occurred because you're up in Northern Ontario? Because it's a bit of a different mix of people and a bit of a different environment.
For sure. The season, it's a baseball podcast, so we'll focus on that. It's a short season. We're dying to get out, and it's always present to mind now. Having spent so much time in Southern Ontario, the seasons are very, very different. And I can remember growing up, more so in hindsight. At the time, we didn't realize it, but now I realize teams back in the day in the Windsor area, Sun Parlor would have been that premier program. Those guys are on the field possibly in March. They're outdoors in March, and we're potentially dealing with still frozen ground and snow, and it's been a little bit better in recent years. But back in the day, before baseball really got rolling in Sault Ste. Marie, and I'll get a little bit more into that, going into the gym wasn't something that we did. It wasn't, we just waited and waited and waited. And, the first practice was your cleats are soaking wet, the balls are waterlogged, there's mud everywhere, and you're not doing a whole lot of anything other than, feeling the open air and potentially dealing with maybe some snow flurries. But you're right. The environment up here, late start, early finish, you got to cram it in. Maybe set me up for that fall season when baseball gets going at Brock. Maybe it was a foreshadow of how quick our season. You get in, you get training camp done, you get going, and in October you're all wrapped up. So August, September, October, 3 months. It was a condensed season, with Brock, and it's a condensed summer in Sault Ste. Marie and across Northern Ontario as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, knowing the one thing we would have had in common is playing in really bad weather. So, I think you would have been a little bit more. I saw a lot of shivering souls, let's put it that way. And, so very interesting was, do you remember when you first got into, starting to go down the road of organized baseball, and were there coaches that were big influences on you before, as you kind of made that journey? Absolutely.
I remember getting in, when we were younger, playing in house league and always, and you'll see the orange and black. There was a kind of a tournament team, is what we would have called it. The travel team was kind of handpicked. Back then, you played house league, and then there was a select team that, the odd skilled pitcher or whoever would be involved in this team. Either whether it was just practices, there wasn't an organized official kind of season with the Sault Ste. Marie reps back in the 80s. It would be now. Now I'm dating myself, but the program developed into the Sioux Black Sox that used to be the Sault Ste. Marie reps. SNBA, Sioux Minor Baseball Association, would have rolled that out, and the program built and built and built, and not unlike how Brock started as a club sport that Colin just walked past and thought it was a nerd's collectible cards and nonsense, and maybe you watch the odd movie. It had humble beginnings as well in the Sioux, and got built into a really great program that Brock benefited from a few years over. So some of those coaches that you talk about, I would have to give Mike LaBelle a big shout out. Mike was and continues to be the heartbeat of baseball in Sault Ste. Marie. He was our coach all the way through with bringing us from the younger group, and we had a really stacked group that stayed together for multiple years, for 6, 7, 8 years, you're playing with the same guys as kids. Very few people cracked that lineup, and those that did were pretty good ball players that went on to experience a little bit of post-secondary and won a few through the system, even beyond my years. Got drafted into the MLB. So Mike LaBelle was a great influence. He was, and again, continues to be in Sault Ste. Marie, the heartbeat of baseball. Another gentleman who I'll have to say, and I've said this over and over, I didn't like him at the outset, and a lot of us didn't. And as you get older and you understand and you mature what the sport really is, the only reason I didn't like him was because he wasn't Mike LaBelle. His name's Ed Jordan. Ed introduced bunt defenses, double cuts. Ed introduced the playbook to us. Ed was coaching us when we were 14, 15, and Mike had the kind of the 16, 17-year-old kids, the team that we could very well have just stepped into and played with. And we actually did. We kind of crossed over because, like I said, we had a really talented group. Now, only in hindsight, I learned that to love what Ed had prepared me for, and the success that we had with Ed Jordan, I owe him an apology outright at the beginning because, like I said, he was great. He's a great baseball mind, a little quirky, introducing kind of plays to us, and we're thinking, what is the importance of this stuff? And we only wanted to play for Mike because Mike was our regular. He was familiar to us, and Ed was a little bit coming out of left field, no pun intended, but different, but really knowledgeable. And when it was all said and done with Ed, our group, he handed us the team essentially. He gave us the lineup. He was looking over at us in the dugout for what we wanted to do in certain situations. He really empowered us to use our baseball knowledge that he imparted on us and allowed us. And at the end of it, when it was all said and done, he's a man that I owe a lot to in terms of my baseball knowledge, in terms of baseball knowledge in Sault Ste. Marie to baseball players. So Mike LaBelle introduced it, kept it going, and Ed sparked a different side of the game, very cerebral, intuitive, and more information, as opposed to Mike shaped our talent and the raw abilities, and then Ed added the sprinkle of all those things that when you get to the next level, and he kind of prepared us for. There's way more to this than hitting the ball and catching the ball. There's psychology to it. There's a lot more that Ed brought into it, and I owe a lot to those two gentlemen, bringing a lot of ball players up in Sault Ste. Marie that have gone on to the next level and made us much, much better baseball players, and men for that matter, because we spent every weekend on the road with these guys for the most part.
Yeah, Mike, I wouldn't beat yourself up too badly about, we all have our coach that we kind of put up on, they're a little bit higher on Rushmore than the other ones are. And sometimes you also got to remember the product of the age that you are, right? Like it's, having a couple of kids, I'm like, Jesus, at 15 and 16, or in my case, 17, 18, learning to play baseball because I picked it up late.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder sometimes the best coach at that point is the person who just infuses you with confidence and helps you develop as a person.
Mm-hmm.
The technical side, you're right, kind of goes by the wayside a little bit because you're a young man and you're just trying to find your sea legs and those kinds of things. So there's a different appreciation for those skills, but I think, you're right. Time and perspective allow us to kind of look back and, I
appreciate it later.
Yeah, you really do. And it's hard because it's not the flashy or the stuff that makes you feel good. It's knowledge that you apply, and it's a different, psychological result.
Mhm.
Good question for you. You're obviously playing rep ball up in the Sioux. Was there organized high school baseball in Sault Ste. Marie? No.
No, nothing like that. There was a men's fastball league back in the day that a lot of minor baseball coaches came from. There was a fastball league that has gone by the wayside now. There used to be a men's kind of open baseball league, like actual baseball, that kind of ebbed and flowed and has since died. One of which my older brother, one of my mentors in the sport, who was a high level. He was an outstanding pitcher and hitter and shortstop. So he kind of ruled the roost in that league, and all my other brothers kind of played in that league as well. So after you're done Sioux minor baseball, and it wasn't as organized as U18 or juniors now, how we've discussed and seen baseball kind of evolve. It just, you played up till bantam or midget, and then it was done. And then you went on to, you're working your full-time job, or you're done with that league, and then you go and play, Molson men's baseball at Queen Elizabeth Field, and there's 4, 5, 6 team league of what we do now. Again, not quite as organized or skilled, I would say, but that's what was next in Sault Ste. Marie.
It's an interesting journey in carrying a last name that's got 3 predecessors carrying it. It's a lot of pressure. Did you feel you were happy-go-lucky, or were you always a kind of a scrappy type trying to live up to the name a little bit?
A little bit of both. I think we're all individuals in this family. Lou being the oldest and me being the youngest, there's 10 years between us. So I think I played in a different era that had its own personality in terms of the Baseball Association and how things were. I never played in that men's senior ball league because it wasn't available. At that point, Sioux minor baseball had grown into what it was, and it was really well organized, and they had built a new field, and it was being taken more and more seriously. This has got to be, and I know you touched on the bump that the Toronto Blue Jays of the late 80s, early 90s kind of infused into Canada. And I think we rode that wave all the way to Sault Ste. Marie as well, where more people got involved, more people were interested, more people paid attention to it, more people were drawn to it to coach and to train. It was, I think we've been riding that wave. We rode that wave all the way through to the early 2000s, and it may have kind of dipped off now, but hopefully maybe a couple good seasons. And Joey Votto, an addition of a good Canadian boy, gets us a little more interest back into it. And again, COVID really give it a shot in the gut. But getting back to your question, I grew up in a different era outside of their shadow, because there's 5 years between the next oldest and myself. So I was kind of in a different system, kind of building my own name with a bunch of different people for the most part. Yeah, you always, around the dinner table or family functions, discuss who's the best athlete, and whoever brings it up is obviously looking for the pat on the back to, and it's there's a funny story, and they'll appreciate it when they listen to the podcast. So 2 of my brothers are only 14 months apart, Joe and Steve, Joe being the older. Steve pitches a no-hitter in maybe Pee Wee, and the game-saving play is a line drive into left field to my brother Joe when Steve's on the mound pitching a no-hitter, and Joe brags multiple times a year, every year since it's happened, and now they're into their 50s. Joe threw the guy out from left field at first.
What?
The circumstances that surround that, you'd have to talk to them. The guy at bat stumbled, tripped, may have eaten a few too many Twinkies. Anyway, Joe takes credit for the no-hitter. Steve pitched it. Our family goes through that multiple times a year, and if I didn't mention it, I think Joe would be pissed, and maybe Steve's pissed for me mentioning it. But Joe saved Steve's no-hitter.
All I have to say is, having thrown a couple of them,
good for you.
There are 27 outs in a game, so I know that it's probably the critical one, but you still got to get 26 outs to get to that, around that one freakish play. But having someone thrown out from left field that might be the only no-hitter in history that was recorded that way.
Don't. Now Joe's gonna put himself up on a pedestal more so than he already does.
Really good question for you. So you're up in the Sioux, and now it's you're advancing likely through high school. Do you remember the 3 universities you were taking a look at, and what led you to, St. Catharines and Brock?
I looked at no universities. I was going the American route. And I was thinking about that seriously for the last couple of years playing ball in the Sioux. So we're looking around and we're talking, and Coach LaBelle is bringing different opportunities our way, which, again, back then, internet's not a thing. The amount of information out there isn't just laying around for us to go and search out. Guidance counselors at school aren't talking about it. It was a pipe dream that very few people explored. We had some high-end talent, a couple guys that went to different academies when we were younger, but we're thinking, that's not us. Like that's not available for us. And I'm talking about the core group of boys that we grew up and we're all still close friends, and we're thinking like, how do we get that opportunity? So Coach LaBelle and even Coach Jordan, they're bringing different things to us. But again, information to them is traveling by pigeon too. The information is just not there. The people going through the system, the amount of information isn't available. Anyway, we end up looking into a couple different opportunities, and the Grand Rapids Griffins, the Grand Rapids Community College Griffins, are coming off a Junior College World Series. The way that it came to us, I can't necessarily recall why we packed up and said we're going to Grand Rapids, because we packed up and went to Grand Rapids. It was I think Mike LaBelle might have organized it for us and said, go for a visit. So we went down for a visit in maybe July or June or July or something like that. Coach Wabeck, who just recently passed away, and Coach Couples, they're there, and we're looking at this program. And we're thinking, this is what it's at. Like, this is what we've been hearing about, tucked away in Northern Ontario, kind of big fish in a little pond. And we're thinking, we're ready for the next level. And this is amazing. They've got a field house. They've got indoor facilities. They've got a lot of the things that we talk about on you've been talking about on this podcast that we have kind of maybe brought into the mix to make a program, and what Coach McRae and Coach Lounsbury and Coach Faulkner and Kemp and all the guys have brought to the program that exists now. We were looking at this in 94, 95. So no university for me. I didn't even do any. I did 2 OACs. I needed 6 at the time. And I was going the American route. We showed up. We went to school there, and we were trying to walk on. We weren't recruited. First semester in, it was a good, like I said, coming off the World Series, they had a lot of recruits coming in. Long story short, I'm not going to make the spring trip because I'm not going to make the team. So I started making phone calls, and how I end up at Brock is unique. my cousin Dan went there. Dan Pino, left-handed pitcher. He's I don't know if you dealt with him or if he just came in right after you.
So Dan was, I think, other than isolated at bats, Dan came late. Okay, he wasn't at the training camp, but he had to start on our JV team, and
yeah.
The big team was tough. Okay, because we were, and I think the second year team benefited. There were 7 pitchers that were all senior people at Brock that were on that team out of the 10 that pitched, and so it just was hard. But Dan was a great guy that likely would have made the team. Truthfully, I can kind of probably say that he probably wouldn't have taken my spot, but he sure as hell would have been thrown out of that bullpen. And real good guy from that perspective. But it was hard because when you're a first year organization, either the people who were recruited to go there or the people who knew about it, and everyone else was in a vacuum until we were already into the season. So, but great guy. So I've had lots of dealings with Dan. So I can't believe that you're related, for crying out loud. So
Dan's my first cousin.
Yeah.
Dan's my first cousin. He was the best man at my wedding. So I call Dan. I find out I'm not making the team. I'm crushed. It was the right decision. I wasn't talented enough to make that team. Still crushed. And I'm like, now I'm in Grand Rapids. I don't want to be in Grand Rapids going to school unless I'm playing ball. The other 2 boys, Jason Piercy, Daryl Wood, they make the team. Outstanding players. Grew up with these guys. Outstanding. Daryl's a multi-sport athlete. Played at Wayne State football. Played at Grand Rapids, starting center fielder. Daryl Wood, fantastic. Jason Piercy, same thing. Third baseman. Full of energy. Great dudes. But I'm leaving, guys. I'm sorry. I call Pino the day that I find out. That's the day he's acting kind of weird and he's not paying attention to me. I'm like, dude, what's up? He goes, dude, we just lost the national friggin' title game today, like earlier today. And I'm thinking, oh, man. And I want to talk to him. I want information. I want to talk about the program. He's like, I don't want to talk baseball at all. And so that would have been the first main loss to Mac. I think Mac knocked you guys out in St. Catharines, if I'm not mistaken. That first national title game?
No. So Brock went to the national finals 2 years in a row to start the program off. So we lost in 95 to Laval in Montreal on referendum weekend. And in 96, they lost to Dalhousie. And that Dalhousie team was unbelievable. And they had a right-handed pitcher named Trevor Wambach, who ended up signing with the remnants of the Expos organization.
Okay.
Right after, because the guy was untouchable, and he pitched 2 games in that tournament. And, and I can understand the disappointment, but, when you look at it over a course of, and I've been trying to counsel people on this a little bit. You look over the course of a 5-year span. The year before there was a Brock team, the year that Brock started, and 3 years after. In that mix, you have the same 4 or 5 teams always competing for national championships with just epic teams, really. Mm-hmm. And so Brock won one, and McMaster won one. But Dalhousie and McGill and Laval, those were all incredible teams that were stacked because you have all these years of non-baseball happening, and all of a sudden you are open for business. And of course you have a rush of players. So you have these teams that, comparative to, winning an Ontario's or a Canadians, where you would pick up 3 or 4 really good players from other teams, but essentially it was your team and 4 or 5 ringers you'd bring in. It felt like at times like our Brock team, other than maybe some pitching depth, was ridiculous. And the McMaster team, I know because my best friend played there, it was unbelievable. Like at the end of the day, you know, the reality is these teams were a little bit stacked because of the inability to get down to the United States, because there was not a lot of scholarship money floating around. There were some situations like mine where I should have been in the U.S. because I had the offer to go, but you know, you have your personal life intervene in that situation. We have other ones where, and I think this is likely to be a lot of your story, but kids who had all the skills but just needed the repetition and the refinement of the coaching really stepped up and easily could have then played in higher level college ball because it just needed to be refined. Your predecessor at second base, a guy named Larry Houston, I played with in junior, and he was a great player. Don't get me wrong, but he never played as well as he did when he was at Brock, and it was because you had Coach Kemp giving little advice in between at bats. You were playing every day, and Larry just went from being a very good player to a great player. And that upside's not always there with the U.S. kids because they've already done all of the playing and done all of the refining, that you've refined them to a point that what they are. And in some of our cases, that extra refining brought with it a new level, you know, like, so I wouldn't beat yourself up too hard about making the choice to come back to Canada. I think, you know, we'll explore this. Do you remember what courses you're going to take at Brock? Like it's, you know, that's got to be another thing, is what am I going to do academically now?
So just to wrap that story up, I'm in Grand Rapids. I make a phone call. I say, I want to come. He's like, yeah, come. Like we're good to go kind of thing. Before I had made that decision, I had some contact with Western. I had some friends there. I had my thoughts. For something was drawing me to London. I called. I'm like, it's going to be Western or it's going to be Brock. And I called Western's athletic department. I asked, are you guys having a baseball team this year? And, you know, we'll call you back kind of thing. I get a call back from whoever the admin assistant was. No baseball this year. Hung up the phone, sent my transcript to Bob Davis immediately, and the rest was history. My marks were good enough from Grand Rapids that the OACs were irrelevant. Well,
that's not a good omen.
Just as we discuss it. Anyway, let's hope the swing stays. So my marks were good enough to transfer, and I was entering after first semester. So I joined that 98 team that wins. I joined them in 97 at the end of their season, and I get exposure to Ebel, and because I never played with Chris Ebel except for earlier in the or late in that season, that after their season was done, we went through winter. I'm in the gym with them in the winter. I'm kind of accepted into the team kind of ahead of time, and then I play out spring with them before the season starts. But then Eves is gone, and but I'm playing with him before our season starts, right? So I'm there in January, February, March, April, May, June. So I played the rest of that spring season before the fall season officially is for my first season with Brock. But I do have some stats from that spring season in 97.
Yeah, I think, you know, the interesting part of all of that is there's nothing quite like a veteran player, you know, to set an example of how you carry yourself and how you perform. And, you know, Ebel was part of that first year Brock team where unusually, very unusually, the pitchers were the leaders of the team because we were all old, relatively speaking. Older and maybe a little bit more experienced from that perspective. Right. And Chris was always just a super cool cat from that perspective. Very composed and, just great smile on him. And he would take the ball and not complain at all and just go out. He was very workmanlike from that perspective, whereas, there were a few of us that were maybe more the fire-breathing dragon type. And, but I've always admired that Chris could project a sense of calm and confidence to his teammates.
Sure.
And, so it's good that you get a chance to play with him, or at least see his act up close, I think is good. So do you remember what program you ended up taking at Brock, like from a curriculum standpoint?
I started in phys ed.
Okay.
That's when everybody in first year is taking the same courses in phys ed, and then you can stream off into and kind of the movement sciences or HK or sport management. And then I after first year, I had I jumped over into the sport management that was brand new at the time, or a couple years old. It was very, very early in its inception. So started out in phys ed, jumped over into sport management.
That's super cool. It seems to be a track that almost every baseball player has taken. I always feel weird because I took business at Brock and feel a little bit like a lonely boy these days. So Mike, do you remember what your first exposure was in terms of a conversation with a coach? Was it with Coach Lounsbury or was it with one of the other coaches?
It would have been with Coach Lounsbury. It would have been with the players before Coach Lounsbury. So I'm coming into the group. Dan kind of takes me under his wing, and Dan's buddies with Colin, and he's buddies with Nish, and he's buddies with Botts and Dixon, and all those guys were pretty tight. And Dan was my ambassador when I got onto campus. So I see all these guys, and there's a meeting, and there's a meeting upstairs at Isaac's on the mezzanine, whatever it was called. It doesn't matter, but I think Nish was leaving. If I'm not mistaken, Nish was leaving to go play in Quebec. So they were trying to fill that spot, and the guys were kind of hemming and hawing about, Nish leaving and not wanting to leave and that kind of thing. And all the boys are upstairs, and I'm kind of the new guy, and coming from a U.S. program, if only by reputation, just coming in, everybody's excited. Everybody's excited for getting into the gym and starting to see all these kind of fresh faces that are coming through. And then Coach Lounsbury, same thing. We're shooting shit, and it wasn't too in depth. It was kind of high level. It was like, we're excited to have you, and there's a spot, at second base kind of thing, and we're excited. Everybody was really excited. The program started to get some legs, and it was building on the previous years of success and getting to a certain point and trying to get over that hump. Those devastating end of the year losses, just about to get over the hump, and there was a lot of positivity with the new pieces that were being added, and like I said, there was a lot of excitement beyond the Nish might be leaving type of storylines.
Yeah, those are always hard. I mean, it's natural in a college or university setting. You have people that graduate. You have people that go on academic probation. You have people that get job offers. These are a natural course of it. And, I think everyone gets to understand that. But in the early years, when there's a kind of foundational pieces, it also leaves voids, like great voids, for people to slide in and take up a leadership role that likely would have been occupied by Andrew Tinish, who I played with for sure, and Andy was a hell of a good guy, and people looked up to him, and he wasn't super vocal. He would lead by example a lot of times, and that was great for people like Colin and Rick. But I think that's just, I feel like is that Lion King? I feel like it's a circle of life, right? When you're on a sports team, it's your senior people age out or they leave, and new people take that mantle over. And I think that's one of the great things about it, actually. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question before we dive into more baseball talk and life talk and that kind of stuff. So, Grand Rapids, you come to St. Catharines. Did the boys, do what they're supposed to do and introduce you to some of the better night spots at Brock?
Sure. We, other than, Isaacs and all the rest of it, some of the fun spots in St. Catharines, we did every night of the week there was, if I had spent more time on my studies than on some of the nightlife or the social activities, things might be a little bit different. But yeah, every day of the week was somewhere new and somewhere different. Listen, we practiced hard, we played hard, and we partied just like everybody else, right? So it was. I went directly into residence. So I'm there halfway through the year. I want to get into residence. I get into residence, and there's no other ball players really in res because my cohort isn't ready to play ball yet. The season's over. There wasn't any. There might have been a couple rookies. What would have been the rookies that had already played the season, because I'm there in January. There weren't a whole lot in res, so I'm in res, and I build my res family. So the ball players or Dan Pino's group. So there's a bunch of Sioux boys that all live together, 5 of them in the same place, just down the hill, right around the corner from Cat's Caboose. That was kind of my pipeline, my social pipeline, as well as my housemates. I was in DeQ. I can't remember the stairwell number, but it was Brant's house. So I still got, friends for life from living in res because I hung out with them and I went to the CAF with them for the most part because baseball wasn't happening really in January. There was some spring or some winter workouts in the gym, and I can't remember when they started, but I'm pretty sure we started right away as soon as I got there in January, and it went all the way through till when spring hit. But I got immersed into my dorm culture right away. So I was hitting different spots with everybody from res, which some were ball players from different people that I really didn't know yet. Still hadn't been really introduced. You see them at winter workouts and stuff like that, but you don't know who's sticking around. You don't know who's going to be there come August. So I wouldn't say that the ball team introduced me to some of the nightlife or interesting spots in St. Catharines. It would have been more. I didn't have a vehicle. I was stuck on campus, so it was jump in and take shuttles or whatever to whether we went to Niagara Falls or we went to anywhere in town at the many different university bars. But I did partake just about every night of the week.
Well, it's I try to you try to kind of dispense advice. I have daughters who are both in university, and I say to them, moderation will take you a long way. And the coaches were really adamant about making us participate 7 days a week. So when the Brock season came, we had to curtail all of our nightlife fairly significantly. Mike, let me ask you this. So you kind of go through a half term and now you're heading into a pseudo training camp, or there'll be an influx of talent come the turn of the new school year. How did you prep for the upcoming season? Do you remember? Did you go play junior or senior?
So in January, February, March, April, May, June. So I'm back home and I'm playing junior back here in the Sioux with a mix of different guys and all the usual suspects from the previous years growing up. I would have gone back to the Sioux and I would have worked my full-time summer job with the family business, doing landscaping, interlocking paving stones, and that kind of thing, and then playing a couple nights a week. No major training, which I kind of look back on and wish I had done things a little differently that way. But you come back in the summer, you play ball, you have some fun. Maybe you go to OBAs, maybe you don't. But at that point, it would have been just a summer season with the boys, work with the family business, and get enough money to pay for school, and head back and count the days till we were headed back to St. Catharines.
So did you have to, and this is interesting to me in years that followed ours, because we had a really tough cut down from about 160 kids down to about 30, and then we got to training camp for a 2-week training camp of 2-a-days that had 50 kids at it. So, it was rough. There were a lot of people that you would get to know that would all of a sudden get the proverbial pink ticket in the locker, like in Major League.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what the process was for you. Were you just kind of on the team and brought to a camp, or what was it? That's of interest to me. I
don't remember being worried. I don't know if it was by virtue of kind of being with the boys for that winter already and being introduced and kind of being taken under their wing. It didn't feel like there was a lot of pressure. I had a good training camp. I ended up platooning in with I think Paul Matecki would have been the starting second baseman at the time. I think Paul. My memory. I can't remember if Paul was going to be graduating. Had played the season in '97, and then was done. But then he played a little bit in the spring. But then come August, it was a new crop. So Paul's out. I platoon in for that spring season, where we took a few trips into the States, played a few games. Come August, I don't remember there being a lot of pressure. There was some competition. I don't remember there being a ton of pressure. I don't remember a list and worried about whether my name was going to be on it. Maybe it was arrogance. Maybe it's just a blessing, not being overly concerned about it. But I wasn't overly concerned. I do remember the gym being packed, and there's the obvious some that deserved to be there, some that were on the bubble, some that weren't going to be coming back. Everybody wanted a shot, maybe not understanding how intense the program was and how good the competition was going to end up being. They show up and they're like, this is for real, like it's legit.
Yeah, trying doing that when they, I think in Colin's description there, I'm pretty sure if Colin would have met me at that time, I was pretty hardcore, so I wouldn't have come across like the dude that was going to be playing fantasy baseball. But I remember that when you got to the gym, there were definitely some people that just went, I don't belong here now. And you kind of hope that people are self-aware but that wasn't always the case. I think more than that, the competition by position kind of ebbs and flows, Mike, specifically on baseball teams. So I've said in previous podcasts that, the 95 team, for whatever reason, had 6 starting caliber first basemen, and we kept 4, which is still a ridiculous number if you think of your previous experiences, but we only had 3 left-handed pitchers in camp. So I didn't feel any pressure about making it. I just wanted to perform because there were some right-handed pitchers that had materialized out of nowhere. Joel Garden, who ended up pitching in D1, and Steve Vatour, who might have been one of the more talented people I'd ever seen. So there was pressure for mound time, and that's a kind of a different thing, when you know you're going to make a staff, but then you want to be starting every third day or fourth day, whatever the deal is, and you don't want to give that position up. A little bit different. So maybe there just wasn't intense position, intense middle infield pressure at that point. Who knows? But tell me a little bit about, any kind of crazy memories or stories that you have from your playing career outside of the Nationals. We'll get to the Nationals shortly, but I'm sure there's a few gems in there where you're just like either laughing or particularly maybe memorable points where you really performed well.
Baseball is very different than many other sports that I've played. I played hockey, I played rugby, I played football. Very, very different. A different pace. I think it's a different mindset, and you're at the ballpark every day, and I still fantasize and kind of it's a romantic type of feeling that I have toward baseball. It's something that I've tried to do well into my 40s, and you'll understand the sentiment. There's a lot of downtime and there's a lot of social time. Although in the moment you're still at the ballpark and you're shooting the shit in the dugout or you're shooting the shit on the field. There's always a level of I call family team dynamics, and you talk about crazy stories. Being at the ballpark every day lends itself to those stories, and you get into your bit of a routine. Maybe it's grabbing a coffee. Maybe it's showing up at the ballpark. The one guy that's always hungover. Like there's just something about everybody's got their own personalities, right? And baseball is habitual, and when you're doing it every day, you fall into these little routines, superstitions, stuff like that. I loved being at the ballpark every day. There was just something about it where it's automatic. You show up, you're doing your thing. The program was well organized. It was a well-oiled machine where you didn't have to worry about balls being there. You didn't have to worry about someone bringing out the L screen. You didn't have to worry about, because everybody had their roles and everybody was doing their part to make it happen. It was a great close-knit team with characters. Again, Colin didn't play with us the year in '98, the first main full year that we played, because Colin had aged out, but I had played with Colin for that spring season. Ebbs had moved on, but you've still got Nish. You've got Grant Giffen at short, who's just a great ball player, extremely skilled, and just an absolute clown. Like he's an absolute clown. I've never seen someone so gifted and so talented in such a small stature. Like he's not a big guy, but he's compared to an Altuve. Like I don't know how Altuve's got power, and not that Giff had power, but just automatic and an arm on him. You've got guys like Fabio Del Rio, who's become a very dear close friend of mine. We were roommates together. Lefty pitcher with a story of his own that goes beyond baseball and going through an elbow tear of some sort. I don't know specifically what the injury was, but it sidelined him all year until kind of the very end, and he starts our championship game at Nationals, which I'm sure we'll get into. But crazy stories. Not a ton of them. Can't really talk about rookie party a whole lot. But we had a really close-knit group of guys that cared for each other, that were willing to put it all on the line for each other, and genuinely cared for each other. We all tried to make each other better. There wasn't that attitude of you wanted to keep your job, but you knew that if you lost it, you slumped. Because it's a short season, we've got platoons to fill your spot, but you cared enough for the team goal that, and I lost my starting job late in the season to guys that deserved it, but it didn't take away from the ultimate goal. We were a family together, and we were all brothers, and there was no real animosity or dissension in terms of wishing someone goes down so that you get your opportunity. Everybody kind of pulled for each other. I don't have a ton of crazy stories. I've got a ton of great memories that we still reminisce about, and I've got lifelong friends as a result, and someone like Jess Dixon, Fabio Del Rio, my cousin Dan, who's been one of my best friends throughout my life. Guys like from Sault Ste. Marie that came in, Greg Arbor, a lefty pitcher with a mean streak in him. Like you want to talk about intensity. I never got a chance to play with you, Mike, but I've heard the stories, and Arbs is one of those guys who is like the Terminator, hat pulled down, and threw a real heavy snapping ball, and Arbs was one guy that you didn't want to fuck around with. He was for real, and he was intense, and he's still a good friend. I've coached hockey with him up until recently, and he's coaching hockey now. His son in the Sault Ste. Marie Rep program, the Sioux Junior Greyhounds, but he's been a lifelong friend as well. The program has built a support system around myself, and I'm still in contact with a lot of those guys that are just like brothers and as close as family to me.
It's a beautiful answer, because it's much more powerful than talking about the day that Colin Tyler got caught picking his nose or something. And I'm just using him as an example.
Yeah.
I like to use Colin as an example.
Yeah.
But
Colin's he's an absolute beauty, though.
He is, and he's deadly. So I have to always watch it around him.
Yes. You never know when he's going to come back and have a talk about you on a different podcast.
Well, he did. He brought up this horrible balk thing that I tried to erase from my memory, where I threw it into the first base dugout. But
it's almost impossible, Mike. But it happened.
I don't know how I did it, but Colin is always there to remind me. It's just kind of like an alarm clock that goes off. Every year or two, I hear from Colin. He's like, he reminds me of that. So,
dude, we'll get into it potentially, and maybe not right now, but there is I have to talk about it before someone else talks about it, and maybe the opportunity will come up a little bit later on. But I've got an incident that has lived on for a while. Or is now the time to talk about it, or later?
Well, I think what I want to do now is, just before we get into nationals and a little bit more of you freelancing here, which is great, talk a little bit about your relationship with the coaches not named Lounsbury. So Wayne Briggs-Jude, I assume you're dealing with Rick Faulkner as the pitching coach.
Rico.
And so talk about that group of coaches, because some of our 95 players wouldn't have had exposure to them, and just the little things that they would do to make you a better person or a better player.
Yeah. So Briggsy was there. Coach Briggs-Jude was there. Coach Faulkner was there. LePage was there, and Zimmerman.
Okay.
Zim was kind of a bench boss kind of thing. Kind of him and his son Matty. Matty was kind of our bat boy kind of thing, but Zim was kind of on the outskirts. But Briggsy was that calming influence. I've heard the guys talk about him. He's not a dad. He's not an uncle. He's not an older brother. Briggsy's like he's that guy that belongs there. He just looks like he belongs there. He's got the look. He's got the look. He's got the obviously he knows what he's talking about type of look to him, and offers subtle advice. Might come to you with a tell or a quick little reminder, whether it's a mental note or something like that. And Briggsy was great. Briggsy would have been at first base, and then Rico would have been at first base as well. But I don't have a ton of stories with Briggsy or with Rico for that matter. But yeah, Rico was intense. So one quick story: we're driving to St. Bonnie, and it's raining, and Rico's driving one of the vans, and some of the guys are kind of in the back and they're talking about the rain, and he's like, "Shut up," and we're like, what's the problem? He won't use the windshield wipers. He says, if you acknowledge it, it's happening. If you want to play ball, you can't play in the rain. So that Rico is a great mind for sports in general. He'll tell you any college football player, stats, that kind of thing, like savantish that way. But he knows his baseball. He is passionate about his baseball. If run out a ground ball, that's not an option. And if he has to remind you, it'll drive him nuts. He's OCD about baseball being played the right way. Rico's a traditionalist, and I learned a lot from him. He's not the kind of guy you want to. He was one of the boys, but at the same time, you don't want to disappoint him because you know that he knows his stuff. He's special. He's a special dude. So again, we still keep in contact, just like the rest of the group does from that team. And LePage was still cutting his teeth, having tried to be a player, transitioning into a role with the team. He didn't have a specific duty. Again, still trying to find his way, and was more of a whatever needs to be done kind of guy. Hit the infield, warm up whoever, do this, that, or the other. Again, LePage is to what he is now. That would have been the early days where he was still trying to find his way, but everybody had their role. And it worked out pretty good. It was a really nice setup. Coach Kemp wasn't around at the time. He had just transitioned out in terms of either whether it was a job keeping him away or what it was. But it would have been Briggsy, LePage, Faulkner, and Zimmerman.
Yeah, I will say this about Mark because I hired him, and with no guarantees that Mike was going to keep him, because Mike had autonomy over the coaches. So we went to bat for Mark and Wayne Briggs Jr. for sure. They were there before there was a Mike McRae or Jeff Lounsbury. Mark's kind of a quiet, easy to underestimate guy. That guy was like a sponge. He absorbed a lot of stuff, and I got a lot of opportunity to talk to him outside of the context of the team dynamic. He was the one guy that before the coaches were there, we would give scouting reports to, or, that kind of stuff. And, 30 years have really helped me understand that Mark's just a guy that keeps things pretty tight to the vest because, he needs to in his job. But
yeah,
also I think just in life, he was always kind of like that. And I'm glad I never played poker against the dude because he'd have cleaned my clock. But
yeah. You never know.
But I think that's hard for, when he's in that mode and the players haven't had prolonged exposure to him. It takes a long time for you to pick up enough moments where he's not doing something because he's a hard worker to kind of get to know him. So That brings us to the, I'll ask one question before we get to, finals and a few other things, but what were your impressions of traveling over to the States? Like, it was one thing to play in the States because I did that for a while. It's another thing to be traveling over there as Canadians and having to go through the border and then, pulling in and the teams you're playing are pretty unfamiliar with you. Did you have a kind of a self-consciousness about it, or did you have a chip? I had a chip on my shoulder. I wanted to kick the crap out of the U.S. teams. But what do you recall of the U.S. experience? Because it's a different one for the Canadian teams, for sure.
You mean going over and playing the U.S. teams as a Brock, playing with Brock?
Yeah.
Intimidating. It was very intimidating. St. Bonnie was a D1 school, and they threw gas, and it's stuff that we didn't see before. Ebes had a hard time beating them. Competing against them, and he'd get smacked around, and Ebes was a Terminator. It was intimidating. There was no chip on my shoulder or our shoulder. We got slapped around pretty good by St. Bonnie. I think as the years moved on, there was, you get some good arms that roll through the program, and a pitcher can keep you in a game, no question, when you've got the quality that Brock attracted over the years. But it was intimidation. They ran the program we wanted to be. They were the type of ball players that we wanted to be. It was just that's the impression that I got. You get to a field, the team is they're lining the diamond, they're bringing out the equipment, they're raking the field. It was a real all hands on deck kind of thing. Those American programs that we played against were what we wanted to turn into. So it was a little intimidating, and it was, are we good enough to be here? I'm standing in the box against a guy that's throwing, mid 80s, maybe even 90. And that's not something that we saw every day. And when the ball sizzles, you feel like you're in trouble at times. And until you can take some hacks and understand that maybe you do belong in that batter's box, is it going to be in my ear, or is it going to be right down the pipe, or am I going to catch up to it? It's something that a kid from Northern Ontario doesn't see every day. It wasn't something that I was exposed to ever, but a guy throwing heat is intimidating. You know it. That's your Superman suit when you can make the glove pop and people are like, holy shit, did you see what's warming up in the bullpen? It's tough to overcome that.
It is, but I was always, because I had I was lucky in that I played in New York before the first Brock season. So I had seen it all at that point. And so I think for hitters in particular, they needed to go through one cycle of playing the 3 or 4 D1 teams that Brock would consistently play. And they would do much better the second go round. And I think you notice this in the scores of the double headers a lot of times. The first game would usually be brutal, and then the second game, pitchers stopped trying to be so fine. That was one of the big things that I found was I had some success pitching against Niagara. And the reason for it was because the game before, our pitchers were trying to paint the corners constantly and were walking too many guys. And, it's hard when there's, at that time, aluminum bats. I think there was this natural, hey, if I throw it down the middle like I do in Canada, or, to a 2 inches off, off that outside corner, it's going to get hit. I think the people that eventually got successful against the American teams learned to just pitch the same way they did in Canada and throw more strikes. When you did that, your stuff was good enough, but you had to have confidence in your stuff, and it's hard to do. I do think that inherently the hitters needed either to play summer, would have been better off playing summer ball in that Buffalo Muni League that I did, where they'd see all these guys already in the summer, or just we needed to play them 4 times as opposed to 2 times. And I think if you'd see a huge difference between an early season Canisius game where your brains got beat in and a later season game where it's a lot closer. And it's for a couple reasons, but one of the main ones is American pitchers are very similar. There's not a lot of crazy variance in arm angle or slot. The right-handers tend to be big, tall dudes, 6'3", 6'4", 210, 205, and they throw fastball slider. And when you get used to that pitch sequencing and the movement on the ball, which is different because Canada's all fastball, curveball, you start to kind of hone in on it. And I think people are a little bit too hard on the Brock guys. It's not a talent thing. It's an exposure thing a lot of times, and just needed a little bit more exposure. But
yeah,
I think because I had played there, I hated it. Like I remember how lovely the St. Bonaventure looks beautiful when you drive there, right? It's mountains. You might as well take a bloody postcard of it. And all that just enraged me. I just wanted to stick it right up all of them, because I just thought of them as like looking at us like we were these sisters of the poor Canadians coming in their vans in their 1970s uniforms, which they kind of were. But, that they were just going to have us for lunch. And I think that was a healthy, but that again is a pitching mentality. As you said with your friend Arbor there, I would take something out of, it could have been the way someone looked at me or someone got off a bus, and I would use that to enrage myself to the point where I just wanted to kill the other team on the day that I pitched. The other 3 days or 4 days, I was a pretty good guy, but the day where you got the ball. So I think it's just a different thing. It's interesting to hear that, because it that's where, in retrospect, I think some of us older guys that were tied to the program may have been able to help a little bit by maybe coming back in the fall camp and speaking to the guys about what they were in for. Because if they hadn't seen it, that first year can be shell shocking. And then, but tell us a little bit about the, finally getting the monkey off of everybody's back and winning nationals, and a little bit about the Canadian rivals you would have had to put away to get there. I mean, I know McMaster was a thorn in the side, but there were other good teams out there. At that point, I think Western was maybe in the first year of their program. And, there were, U of T was always a good program, typically. Tell me a little bit about that journey to win a nationals.
Road to nationals goes through U of T, goes through Western, goes through Mac. That's who mattered. Waterloo, Laurier, Guelph didn't scare anybody. London had an older, hard throwing righty that we had problems with. The place that wasn't supposed to have the program.
It's amazing what happens when you put Mike Lumley in as a coach and you've got that ballpark there to play in. I pitched in that ballpark for many years, so
I can't. I'm bad on names. I don't know anybody that played on any other team, but Western had a hard throwing righty. U of T always had some good players, but U of T just seemed like guys that went to the school that played ball. Like there weren't. It didn't feel like they were as invested. Something about it, maybe the size of the school, maybe the importance that they put on the program, and then there's Mac, and there's a general actual burning hate that exists, and you don't wear purple. anywhere during the season or anywhere on campus. It's that rivalry and there's heartache there for years that sucks. So the road to nationals, it had gone through Hamilton a couple of years previous to my knowledge. Now, maybe you can help me with what you might know about it, but I'm pretty sure Mac stopped the procession, whether it was the year previous at OUAs or nationals, but and this will lead into the Arbor story. So we've got to get through Mac to go to nationals, to go to Nova Scotia when we went for nationals. The previous year, I think.
Year, Brad Reeson, who was a Mac second baseman, and at that point playing in his third year, hit a home run to win the game in the bottom of the seventh, I think. Nationals
or OUs?
No, it was to eliminate Brock.
Okay, to eliminate Brock.
Yeah.
That's okay. So that heartache is still fresh. If I'm not mistaken, 3-game series, I think 2 games are ended in the bottom of the 7th with home runs. Yeah. Previous year. Okay, so now we're playing Mac again. We're in Hamilton. Game 1. Mac walks it off in the bottom of the 7th. 3 games in a row. Now I don't have those scars. And many of us don't have those scars, but there's some guys that have the scars and they are not well. It's not going like, I think Nish might have come in to close the game and they hit it off Nish. Like that hurts. Or Nish from attack. I think it's Nish. Nish might give up that home run. And if it's not him, sorry, Nish. And if it is, sorry, Nish. But Mac wins, walk off, game 1 of the doubleheader in Hamilton. And I'm like, oh shit, that sucks. We got guys like, oh my God, it happened again. Giffen, Fab, Dixon. They're like, this is unbelievable. Like 3 games in a row, they've walked us off in the bottom of the bottom of the 7th. Greg Arbor's got to pitch game 2. He was our ace. Lefty, threw hard, 85, 86. Intense guy, like I mentioned, hometown boy from the Sioux. He's got to pitch game 2, and nobody wants to play. Everybody's like, this fucking sucks. I can't believe it, and they're dragging their asses. And Arbs is got to go to the pen. He's got to warm up because we got to play in a half an hour or whatever. And he lights everybody up with a profanity-laced tirade. Like, we still have a game, and I'm thinking you can feel when your team isn't going to rally. You got to go on the bump by yourself, and Arbs has got to go out there by himself, and everybody's like just dragging their lips. Anyway, we pull up our socks. Arbs pitches a friggin' 1 or 2 hitter, and we beat Mac. And then we got to come back home. So it's 1-1. We got to come back home. And I can't remember how that game went, but we won and we're off to nationals and we've exercised the demon. And, but that's my little Arbs story where he did not have a team behind him until he lit us up and told us to smarten up. We got a game to win. Let's go. And he took it. And I'm sure, I don't know the pitching mentality, what you guys are thinking when you go out there and pitch a gem, what's going on in your head when you just decide no one's going to get a hit and just mow everybody down. But Arbs did that, and it was awesome to see. It was embarrassing to not have the same intensity or willingness at the moment where we needed to back him up. He made sure that whether we were there or not, it didn't matter. He threw fire all game long.
There's not. I can tell you, when you have a great game, not much goes through your head, truthfully. I mean, and that's not true of all pitchers. Like, there are some very cerebral pitchers who are like Greg Maddux out there, who think every little detail out. I'm going to throw it 87% velocity, 3 inches off the outside corner, so the guy's going to swing over it.
Yeah.
But, he's wired like I was. So, even when you knew your teammates were down and stuff, you adopt a bit of a enforcer for the team mentality, where you feel you got to go out and crush the will of your opponent, and eventually the guys will snap out of it and find a few things that'll get their confidence rolling. And your job is just to put up zeros long enough so that the game is out of hand at a certain point. And when you have your best games as a pitcher, you typically win them 6-1, 5-0, those kinds of things, because everyone feeds off of that lightning rod, and eventually the dam breaks on the other side. You can't, like, there's virtually no chance that McMaster was going to win that game. All due respect to some great hitters there, and they had an incredible number of clutch players at that time. One thing I'd like to obviously touch on, now that we could talk a little about Nationals in a minute, but you must remember the McMaster coach Henry Romanowski and his ongoing chirping battle with Matt Fletcher, because I don't think those two got along very well, truthfully, from what I hear. Anyway,
If you weren't wearing a Brock jersey, Fletch hated you, and you hated Fletch. That goes without saying. Fletch was intense. Glad he was on my team. He was extremely clutch. He was so clutch, and our stretch working toward Nationals, he was unstoppable. Plain and simple. Like, he was he was automatic when he went up there. And if you didn't hate him as an opposing coach, now I don't know I can't remember the specific rivalry that you might be talking about with their coach, but it felt like it didn't matter what color jersey you were wearing. Fletch was going to be under your skin, intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah, he is a piece of work, like all catchers are, and the thing is, I dwarfed the guy, right? Like, he would come out to the mound and his chest would be about here, and but he would always just say something to just lighten it up a little bit, and then we get back down to work. He was a hard-working guy, and I don't know, with all his outrageous kind of way he carries himself on the field, is, he kind of, you could see how the opponents hated him. I loved it, because as a catcher, you needed a bit of an attitude to catch someone like, with a guy like Eaves, he's the guy that would get Chris fired up. With me, he was the guy that we were kindred spirits. We just wanted to kill everybody. So it's a kind of a fun thing. But Matty is certainly one of the unique characters that define that team, because he was such a fiery guy. Yeah. Tell me about winning Nationals.
So we're headed to Nova Scotia. Not sure. We're playing UNB. We ended up beating UNB in the final. Heading to Nationals was an adventure. We had a Niagara Airbus.
I've heard about this bus.
Donated, with no bathroom on board. And you've got, how big is our roster? 12 pitchers, 15 position players. We've got 35 guys that are on this bus, jammed packed. It breaks down on the way there. It's let's call it 30 hours for argument's sake, 32 hours. It breaks down. It broke down on the way there and on the way back. We haven't played any baseball yet, and we're broken down on the way there. We roll in to Wolfville, Nova Scotia, and we were rolling. the team, everybody was kind of at the top of their game. Those that were ready to go. Fabio was the only question mark because he was coming off the injury, and was real nervous about throwing a changeup ever again because it popped on a changeup, and his confidence was shattered. And he was a big part of our team, and this was his last chance, and he wasn't sure if he was going to get in. And I'm living with him at the time, and he was going through physio and rehab all year long. And I can imagine when my arm's hanging, it doesn't really matter if I have to make 3 or 4 throws throughout the day, or a long, a relay throw or whatever. It's going to hurt, but I'm not getting the ball back every pitch and having to throw on an elbow that I don't know is going to stay together. So I was real tight with him on that, and it was something that we really didn't speak about, right? You don't want to be reminded or talk about your fragility, right? So so Nationals is everybody's is rolling again except Fab. We're rolling through the round robin, and we did really well. My memory is a little foggy as to how it had gone down, but we're rolling through, and we're going to end up playing UNB in the final. Previous game, it was a round robin game that didn't mean anything. I had lost my starting job at that point, but I get in this game. We're playing this game at about 1:00 in the afternoon. Fab's on the hill, or Fab can remember. Fab hadn't pitched at this point. I don't think. Maybe he got in for a few innings in a nothing game. But right behind the backstop is where the sun is.
Ew.
So we're all eye blacked up and sunglasses and the whole bit. And your pickoff story, this might beat it. I'm at second base. We were fighting the sun all day. And a ball gets hit at me. And to my defense, it was a high hopper. It was a chopped ball. It bounces off the plate, kind of hops up, and I don't know where the ball is.
Oh, Jesus,
but I know it's been hit. And when you stare at the sun, and then your vision's messed up because whether you got sunglasses on or eye black or whatever, you've still been staring at the sun. So now you've got like a blind spot. Anyway, the ball ends up at my feet. It rolls to my feet. And everybody's like, what the fuck are you doing? and my excuse is I lost it in the sun. And the joke is I lost a ground ball in the sun, which is something that I get reminded of very often. And my roommate Fabio is the only one that comes to my defense because at another time in the tournament, he's on the hill and he's got the sun right behind him, and he's wearing eye black as a pitcher. But I lost a ground ball in the sun. Is a low light of my trip to Nationals, but
that sounds like a custom T-shirt waiting to happen. I lost a ground ball in the sun.
Yeah, it's a personalized license plate. It's it's a T-shirt. It's a tattoo. It's a lot of things that I'm reminded of often about the ground ball in the sun. So now we're going to the final game. All the nonsense is done. We're ready to rock and roll. We're ready to go. We're playing UNB. Fab gets the start, and we're like, he hasn't pitched all year. Fab gets on the hill. Fab gets knocked around. Top of the first. Going into the bottom of the first, it's 4-0. We're down 4-0. And we're thinking, just like when Mac hit that walk-off dinger, we're thinking, we came all this way and we're questioning coach and we're wondering, what a position to put Fab in. And he's my buddy and he's my brother. And I'm thinking, what a shitty thing to do to a guy and put him in a spot where he's not going to say no. You're never going to not take the ball. And we're down 4-0. He gets smacked around and we're thinking, bottom of the first, friggin' single, double, friggin' bomb, 4-4. We're back in it. We're on top of the world. And the final score was 10-7, I think, when it was all said and done. But what a roller coaster from the buses breaking down to the round robin, losing the ground ball in the sun, Fab starting the championship game, getting knocked around. It's 4-0, coming back in the bottom of the first to or I think it was double, single, home run, and we're back in it. We never looked back from there, and partying in Halifax that night. We've got somebody has gone to get booze, whether we win or lose, and we've got some drinks at the ballpark after we win. And I don't know if you've heard the story or not. So we've got this bus that we've got to travel on tomorrow. So we're being very cognizant of, the vets are like, listen, have fun, whatever. We've got to drive back on this bus. Be careful. So we're partying at the field. We're having some drinks, we're whatever. Everybody takes a couple drinks with them on the bus. And so now we're sitting there, kind of sitting there like this, very cordial, whatever. Everybody's lined up and everybody's ready to go. Coach comes on the bus. Lounsbury. He runs on the bus and he's shaking beers and spraying everybody. So we follow suit. This bus is an absolute disaster. And we've got an hour to Halifax. And the bus is a disaster. And we're drinking and dumping. The driver's driving down the highway and we're pouring beers on his head. He was loving it. He was like another member of the team. He loved it. He's the one that went and got the booze for us. And I don't know who it was. It might have been Lounsbury for all I know. He's driving and he's getting a beer dumped on his head. Traffic infractions, laws broken, the whole bit. I can say it now. This bus is a disaster. We party in Halifax the rest of the night.
It's amazing. I will say this in defense of Mr. Del Rio. It is incredibly easy to pitch when you're healthy, when everything's right. And that's really the way you're meant to pitch. When you're still fighting the kind of the physical part of it. It's war. There's no guarantee. Just even making it through an inning is a victory, truthfully. Particularly for someone who throws a changeup. That's, I kind of joked on a previous podcast that I only threw 15 in my whole life, 2 of which ended up over the fence. So I just quickly said, this isn't for me. It's a touch pitch that requires tons of reps to get the feel for it. And there's no way he could have simulated that in 2 or 3 innings. The fact that he was gutsy enough to go out there with like all pitchers, which I have immense respect for, they take the ball 100% of the time. The only 2 enemies I've ever made really on a baseball field, other than when I was pitching, but off the field, were both a couple of guys that were pitchers that one used to just go to the coach and say, I'm done. After 4 or 5 or 6, whatever, 7 innings, he'd just say, I'm done. No one would tell anyone, wouldn't have the respect for his teammates to at least let someone get up in the bullpen and do it. He would just pull himself from the game, regardless of the number of pitches. And the other one was a reliever once that I pitched with that used to lobby to go into games. He would say, that starter's looking pretty tired out there. I think, you should pull him. And that is gutless. So Del Rio's got a lot of guts, and that's why he's a Badger, and that's why he's a Badger coach, and that's why he has stuck with the program for a long time. And I'm proud of the fact that he did it because, it is hard when you go out and you see your friend take one on the chin like that. But
yeah,
the fact he answered the bell, and even when he wasn't at his best, says so much about that guy's character. No wonder you guys rallied around that. It's the perfect guy to start that game, ultimately. So, I'm sure he wishes he was maybe more on that day, but you're exactly right. There's no real expectation that for someone that has as much touch on the ball as a changeup takes to throw, and you're coming through an arm problem caused by it. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
But, with that, you expelled the ghosts of all these losses in finals and, a guy like Brad Reeson coming up clutch. And the program, sees a bit like a volcano building up for 4 or 5 years, and it explodes, and this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Why don't we touch on, and never mind the fact that they probably had to spend half of next year's budget getting that damn bus fumigated, dried out, and
fun fact, that bus driver cleaned that bus all night. When we got back so we get back in at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and we're leaving at 7 or 8. That bus was spick and span when we got on the bus in the morning, and it smelled like lemons. Couldn't believe it. We couldn't. We were thinking, number one, we get up, we're hungover, we're maybe even still a little drunk, and our heads are pounding, and we're like, oh no, we got to go on that bus. We got to go on that bus. Like, this couldn't get worse. We got on the bus, and it was spotless.
Well, that driver deserves a championship ring just for that alone.
For sure.
It didn't stop the bus from breaking down, though. Like, clearly he may have wanted to put a little bit of work into that engine. Yeah. Mike, how does your Brock career wrap up, and what is the next step for you after Brock?
My next step is taking inventory and the time that I spent, the time that I didn't spend on my studies, whether or not I was going to graduate. I ultimately made a decision to move on. I didn't graduate. I moved on to Mohawk College in Hamilton, just down the road, to end up with a 3-year architectural diploma. I didn't spend the requisite time and focus on my studies, and I needed to do something that was in my blood, and something that I'd never thought about doing before, but getting into construction. And I went to Mohawk for the better part of 4 years. I got involved in student government. I got involved in athletics there. I played rugby there. It was a real gear change for me. But it was one of the best decisions I made in my life after the fact.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
And clearly you've spoken earlier about preserving your friendships that you made at Brock. So you were involved with a few weddings. That either means you're the best guy at cracking out the Macarena ever, or I heard that you were Jess Dixon's MC at his wedding. Is that true?
Yeah, I was. Shocking. Dixon makes a lot of cerebral decisions. He's a very smart guy. He thinks through everything he does. And when he called me and asked me, I thought he was joking, to be honest with you. And then, sure enough, he wasn't. And I took it serious. And listen, all the boys, from Nish's Christmas parties, where Colin is there and Giffen is there and Dixon is there and Grucci's there and Bots is there. So Nish has had Christmas parties since I would say past 10, 15 years. There's always somebody that we're all getting. Fabio's involved in that. Fab's pretty tight with him too, because Fab stayed kind of in the loop in terms of coaching and all of that. But all the boys, I end up Dixon's MC, and I've been at Fab's wedding, and they've been to my weddings. But Dixon's wedding was being the MC at his wedding is easy. He's a great guy. His wife Elizabeth is a fantastic woman. So 3 years ago, I get Dixon has always given me shit for not visiting. I think my notifications. Should I turn my notifications off? Are they coming through on your end?
No,
okay.
You're good.
Okay, it's past the timeline that we were supposed to be, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Where was I?
Jess Dixon giving you shit for not visiting.
Oh, yeah, I was in Cambridge and in the Hamilton area, and he was in Windsor, which was a little bit of a jaunt. So every, come and visit. I was never in the area. It was just not something that I had no business other than to go visit my good buddy. There was no activities that would have shared, visit and do this, that, or the other. So anyway, I get a job offer to work in Windsor and build 2 apartment buildings. So I give him a call. I said, well, you've asked me to visit. I'm coming, and I need a place to live too, by the way. At least I said, I'll visit for an extended period of time. I need a spot before I find my accommodations. I need a place to stay for a while. So Dixon and Elizabeth put me up for probably 6 or 8 weeks. I'm living with my buddy Jess. But before that, he gets married. He asks me to be the MC, and I'm going through. What am I going to say about the guy? Like, the room's going to be full of family and friends, but if it was an athletics banquet, it would be a piece of cake. Everybody knows exactly what we're talking about, and all the inside jokes are actual. They're a piece of cake. But I'm thinking, what am I going to say to his grandparents and his aunts and uncles? Like, what am I going to talk about? The only guy I know really is a baseball player, and they don't even really know him as a ball player. No. So I'm sitting there and I'm having a few drinks, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to talk about? I don't know Elizabeth particularly well either. So I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? So anyway, I kicked it off with two observations. If you've ever met John, his dad, he looks exactly like Mike Ditka.
Oh yeah, he's got the great mustache. Right?
He's got the great mustache, the hair slicked back. I think John Dixon is related to Mike Ditka, and I also think that Jess is Ed Norton. If he doesn't look like Ed Norton, he could be a family member of Ed Norton. Anyway, I mentioned these two things, and then all of a sudden, light bulbs start going off with everybody in the place. So that kind of broke the ice, and then the theme going to nationals from our leadership group was the old LSU coach, the coaching speech about the rope and grabbing the rope and kind of everybody being on the same page and towing the rope and holding the rope, and it popped into my head suddenly, and I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to try and work this in somehow, some way. So I go find a rope in my truck. It's an old beat up rope, but it's a rope that's been tried, tested, and true. And I cut it up into little pieces. And Jess and Nish and that leadership group, Fletch, came to our group before going to nationals and gave everybody a piece of the rope. And some still have it. Some people had it in their hat. I think Jess still has his piece of rope. And that was kind of a theme that kind of brought us together, a team building moment in 1998 when we went to Nova Scotia. So I bring this out in I think he got married in 05, 05 or 06. So I've got enough rope to give everybody in the room a piece of rope. And I kind of just said, you know what, it's about being a team, and Jess and Elizabeth can't do it by themselves, and we're the team. They might be the pitcher and the catcher, but they need the support system around them. And I gave the bag to Nish, and Nish was half in the bag at the time. I'm like, Nish, make yourself useful and hand these pieces of rope out. So we kind of tied that back together. And little did I know, because Jess and I didn't talk about what I was going to say or what I was going to do. We didn't edit it or anything like that. So when Jess was dating Elizabeth, and I don't know if they were engaged at the time, but Elizabeth was going to Australia. And Jess gave Elizabeth, I don't know if it was his piece of the rope or if it was a piece of rope, but he sent her the rope. He sent her to Australia with the rope, and it kind of all tied in together, which was a real a treat that I had no idea that had happened. I had no idea. So Jess has been a great friend. He was a great teammate. He's been a great friend. He's as close as a brother. We get on the golf course for the past 2 years. We were on the golf course every weekend together with a few other usual suspects that aren't related to the Brock program. But Jess and I have really fostered it and built a really close, tight-knit relationship that I'm forever grateful for his hospitality when I came to Windsor. And like I said, he's been him and Elizabeth both have been all stars in my books, and Jess and someone like a Fabio and I have been tight. We were roommates, and we're still tight as hell. We pick up right where we left off. We don't see each other or talk to each other as much as we should, but he's a brother just the same. And those guys are teammates, family members, and real important pieces of my life even at 47 years old.
Amazing. Well,
yeah,
I love hearing that. I mean, I'm still very tight with the core, like a core of people that went to Brock, obviously, and I have a little bit of exposure because I pop my head in every so once in a while and that kind of stuff. But it's I think as we get a little bit older, and we've talked about this on some other podcasts, right? It's a key time for guys. I think, and people don't understand this, but men, have a difficult time after 45 to about 55, just balancing their life a little bit. There's a lot of change that happens. People go through job losses and divorces and becoming empty nesters. All these things represent changes and difficulties for folks. And in my opinion, and it's something that I stand by, anyone who's worn that jersey that's hanging on my wall, sorry, Mike, I think there we go. Anyone who's worn that jersey that's hanging on my wall, and that was hanging on yours and just flew down, I think it's saying to you, you need to put this on again in about 7 months, is a teammate for life. And I don't care if I played with you, if I didn't play with you, if you saw me, if you didn't see me, or if I saw you or didn't see you, you're a Badger. Mm-hmm. And, you're a person that has certain values that emanate through the program and that make it a standard bearer in Canada. And we stick by our teammates. We don't abandon them. We don't forget them. Even the most, we had a guy that I brought up as a trivia. He's contributing now as a trivia question. We had one guy that had won at bat in our first year named Daryl Duncan, who was a call-up from the JV team. So I kind of like thinking of Daryl Duncan every so once in a while because he was a hell of a good guy. Yeah. And so that brings us to where you are today. What are you up to today, Mike, that other than being a great friend to a bunch of ex-Badgers, what are you up to today? I'm
back in Sault Ste. Marie. I'm in the construction industry and I'm a construction manager. I was in, like I said, I kind of I platoon into different cities depending on what's being built and where it's being built. So I'm back in the Sioux now. I've got two young, a 22-year-old soon, and one that just turned 13. My oldest son Connor is an apprentice electrician. He's doing great, and my 13-year-old is an aspiring hockey player. And we just got back from Timmins from the Northern Ontario Championships, so he keeps my time busy, or my time wrapped up with him. So it's just being a dad and trying to get some work in there as well. Getting excited for the season to change and get back on the golf course. That's something that I it's a passion of mine now as well, and that's what's the latest.
It's amazing. I played my first OBAs in Timmins, and it was a experience that I try to forget. But Ted Genren, who founded the program with me, has been my friend since grade 2. We have been friends all the way through many hiccups and left turns in life and that kind of stuff. And your podcast has all been about really your teammates as friends, and I think that that's really cool to hear. And it was great for me to hear your story. Similar to you hearing about what a crabby son of a gun I was. I just heard about what a great guy you were from Jess. And so when we were putting this together, the intention was always to reform the first team that ever performed for Brock, try to get every member there, and then sprinkle in people from the preceding 3 or 4 years or following 3 or 4 years that would have fit in with that first year team. Because that first year team, it was, I've said it before, the championship ring was just surviving and bringing this program to life.
Right.
Losing one game at the end didn't change that. And, everyone went to bat for you, Colin and Jess in particular. Those two said we should reach out. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you at second base there. Provided I last more than one pitch. I'm genuinely concerned about being able to hit a catcher at this point. So
the in our as time passes, and I got to thank you for kind of keeping it alive, and thank you, number one, for the effort and dedication in what you've done to get the Brock baseball program its birth, and all the stories that we're sitting on the shoulders of giants, calling ourselves tall, and that's you guys at the beginning. I'm going to thank you for that. I owe a lot of what makes me happy today to a program that had the people that I would never have met had the program not started. I'll be honest with you. So eternal thanks to you, Mike, for that.
Well, you won one, so that part I'm really happy, because at the end of the day, a championship, it's a group one, right? Like without a foundation, there is no taking that next step. And I know better than anyone just what a mountain it was to climb against McMaster. My best friend was their star player, and he's frankly a pain in the ass as a player, in terms of just being great. So, greatness, I think, is measured by the fact that this program is now 30 years old. It's produced a ton of great people, leaders in life, some people that went on to play pro ball. To me, that's less important, because that is a big formula that was tied to the access to get across the border at the time. We would have had more pros and probably less people playing at Brock if it would have been a more open environment. I think it's in the quality of seeing now their kids starting to show up in these programs. Doug Lunny, who you would have had to, hit against. His kid is playing at Brock now. So poor Doug is in for flogging when he goes back to McMaster.
Yeah.
This is, Daryl Kemp's son is pitching for the program. How amazing
That's
is
crazy.
that?
Yeah.
And, so I think it's just really about celebration and reunion and the strength of more of us being friends moving forward. We're stronger together than we are apart. So
sure.
Thank you so much for your time, Mike. And
yeah, I look forward to August or September.
Right. September. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, the smell of grass.